The sun rose over the small town of Ridgewood, casting a golden glow on the quiet streets. Birds chirped softly as Marcus Davis stepped out of his modest home, locking the door behind him with care. It was just another ordinary morning for Marcus, but he liked it that way. Ordinary meant safe. Ordinary meant predictable. And after everything life had thrown at him, predictability felt like a gift. Marcus was a tall man with broad shoulders and warm brown eyes that always seemed to carry a hint of kindness. At 34, he had already weathered more storms than most people twice his age. A single father to 9-year-old Maya, Marcus worked 2 jobs, delivering packages during the day and cleaning offices at night, to make ends meet. Despite the challenges, he never let bitterness creep into his heart. Instead, he poured all his energy into being the best dad he could be. That morning, Maya stood by the front gate clutching her backpack, her curls bouncing as she hopped from one foot to the other. "Dad, I'm gonna ace my spelling test today," she declared proudly, flashing a gap-toothed smile. Marcus chuckled, crouching down to her level. "I don't doubt it for a second," he said, ruffling her hair affectionately. "But remember, no matter what happens, you're still my smartest girl." Maya giggled, then hugged him tightly before skipping toward the school bus waiting at the corner. Marcus watched her climb aboard, waving until the bus disappeared around the bend. For a moment, he allowed himself to feel a swell of pride. Raising Maya alone wasn't easy, but seeing her grow into such a bright and happy child made every sacrifice worth it. After bidding farewell to his daughter, Marcus headed to the local cafe to grab a quick breakfast. The cafe was a cozy little spot where everyone knew each other's name. As he walked in, Mrs. Jenkins, the elderly owner, greeted him warmly. "Morning, Marcus. Your usual?" "Yes, ma'am," Marcus replied with a polite nod. He took a seat near the window, glancing outside at the peaceful street. People bustled about their routines, walking dogs, jogging, or chatting with neighbors. Ridgewood was the kind of place where folks looked out for one another, where crime was rare, and trust ran deep. While sipping his coffee, Marcus struck up a conversation with Mr. Patel, who owned the convenience store next door. They talked about the upcoming community fair and how much fun the kids always had there. Marcus promised to bring Maya this year. She loved the carousel and cotton candy. As he finished his meal, Marcus checked the time on his phone. He needed to get moving if he wanted to start his delivery route early. But before leaving, he stopped by the bulletin board inside the cafe. Someone had pinned up flyers advertising babysitters, lost pets, and even a free yoga class at the park. One flyer caught his eye. It was an announcement for a neighborhood watch meeting later that evening. Marcus decided to attend. If there was one thing he believed in, it was taking care of the community that had supported him through thick and thin. With a final wave to Mrs. Jenkins, Marcus stepped back onto the sidewalk, ready to tackle the day ahead. Little did he know, this seemingly ordinary morning would soon spiral into something far beyond anything he could have imagined. His world was about to change, not because of anything he did, but because of forces completely outside his control. For now, though, Marcus simply adjusted the strap of his bag, took a deep breath of crisp autumn air, and began walking toward his first stop of the day. Life was good. Or so it seemed. Marcus's day began like any other, filled with the familiar rhythm of his delivery route. The streets of Ridgewood were alive with activity, children playing on sidewalks, neighbors chatting over white picket fences, and cars moving slowly through the narrow roads. Marcus navigated it all with practiced ease, humming softly to himself as he drove his van from one address to the next. His first stop was a quaint house on Maple Street, where an elderly woman named Mrs. Thompson greeted him at the door. She handed him a plate of homemade cookies wrapped in foil, insisting he take them for Maya. "You tell that sweet girl I said hello," she said warmly, her eyes crinkling with affection. Marcus thanked her and promised to pass along the message. These small moments of kindness reminded him why he loved living in Ridgewood. It wasn't just a town. It was a family. By mid-morning, Marcus had already completed half of his deliveries. He parked his van near the park to stretch his legs and grab a bottle of water from the cooler inside. As he stood by the edge of the playground, watching kids laugh and swing high into the air, he couldn't help but feel a sense of contentment. This was what life was about. Simple joys, shared smiles, and knowing you were part of something bigger than yourself. But then, something unusual caught his attention. Across the street, near the corner store, 2 police officers approached a young man who looked no older than 20. Marcus squinted, trying to understand what was happening. The officers spoke sharply, their voices carrying across the quiet street. The young man raised his hands defensively, shaking his head as if trying to explain himself. Something about the scene didn't sit right with Marcus. The tension was palpable even from a distance. Curiosity tugged at him, but Marcus hesitated. He had work to do, and besides, it wasn't his business. Still, he lingered for a moment longer, unable to look away. That's when he noticed another bystander, a teenage girl holding her phone steady, recording the interaction. Her face was tense, her fingers trembling slightly as she captured every detail. Marcus frowned. Whatever was unfolding, it clearly wasn't routine. Reluctantly, he climbed back into his van and resumed his route, but the image of the young man stayed with him, gnawing at the edges of his mind. Why had the officers stopped him? What had he done, or hadn't done? Marcus tried to shake off the unease, reminding himself that he couldn't fix everything. His job was to deliver packages, not solve mysteries. The rest of the morning passed uneventfully, though Marcus found himself glancing at his phone more often than usual. Social media notifications buzzed incessantly, and when he finally checked, he saw why. A video had gone viral. It showed the exact scene he'd witnessed earlier, the officers confronting the young man, their body language aggressive, their tone accusatory. In the background, the teenage girl's voice could be heard saying, "This isn't right. They're not listening." Marcus froze, his heart sinking as he watched the clip. The young man, whose name was later revealed to be Jamal Carter, was accused of shoplifting from the corner store. According to the officers, someone had reported seeing him steal a candy bar, but Jamal insisted he hadn't taken anything, his pleas falling on deaf ears. Within minutes, he was handcuffed and shoved into the back of a patrol car, his protests drowned out by the sound of slamming doors. Comments flooded the post, some outraged, others skeptical. People demanded answers, while others defended the police without question. Marcus scrolled through the reactions, feeling a mix of anger and helplessness. He knew how quickly stories could twist online, how easily facts could get buried under assumptions. But one thing was undeniable. The video painted a troubling picture. As Marcus sat in his van, staring at the screen, memories surfaced of times when he'd been followed in stores simply because of the color of his skin, of stares and whispered comments that made him feel invisible yet scrutinized all at once. He thought of Maya, too, and the world she would grow up in. Would things ever change, or would history keep repeating itself? For the first time that day, Marcus felt the weight of something much larger pressing down on him. This wasn't just about Jamal anymore. It was about justice, fairness, and whether truth could still cut through the noise. And as much as he wanted to turn away, to focus on his own life and responsibilities, he realized he couldn't. Not this time. With a deep breath, Marcus closed the app and started the engine. His next delivery awaited, but his mind was elsewhere. Little did he know this incident would soon pull him into a whirlwind of emotions and decisions he hadn't anticipated. For now, though, he drove on, wrestling with questions that had no easy answers. By the time Marcus reached his next delivery stop, the weight of the morning's events pressed heavily on his shoulders. He parked his van outside a tidy brick house and stepped out, forcing himself to focus on the task at hand. But as he carried the package to the door, his thoughts kept drifting back to Jamal and the viral video. It was everywhere now. On social media feeds, in group chats, even being discussed by local news outlets. People were talking, debating, and arguing, their opinions clashing like waves against a rocky shore. The homeowner greeted him with a smile, but Marcus barely registered it. "Thanks," he muttered absently, handing over the package before retreating to his van. As he drove away, he glanced at his phone again. Notifications continued to pour in, each one pulling him deeper into the growing storm. One comment stood out among the rest: "If we don't speak up, nothing will change." Those words struck a chord within Marcus. They echoed something he'd always believed, that silence only perpetuated injustice. Yet speaking up wasn't easy, especially when doing so could invite scrutiny or backlash. Still, the image of Jamal's face, confused, frightened, and desperate, lingered in his mind. How could he ignore what he had seen? How could anyone? Later that afternoon, Marcus decided to take a detour to the corner store where the incident had occurred. He didn't know why exactly. Maybe he wanted answers, or perhaps he just needed to see the place for himself. When he arrived, the area was quieter than usual, though a few curious onlookers lingered nearby, whispering amongst themselves. A chalkboard sign near the entrance advertised daily specials, its cheerful message contrasting sharply with the tension that still hung in the air. Inside, the store owner, Mr. Patel, was busy restocking shelves. Marcus approached him cautiously, unsure how to broach the subject. "Hey, Mr. Patel," he began, his tone casual. "I heard about what happened earlier today. Is everything okay?" Mr. Patel sighed, setting down a box of cereal. "It's complicated," he admitted, running a hand through his thinning hair. "Someone called the police saying they saw Jamal steal something. But I've known Jamal since he was a kid. He helps me carry boxes sometimes. I can't believe he'd do something like that." Marcus nodded slowly, processing the information. "Did you tell the officers that?" "I tried," Mr. Patel replied, his voice tinged with frustration. "But once they made up their minds, there was no changing it. They didn't listen to me, or to Jamal for that matter." The conversation left Marcus feeling unsettled. If even Mr. Patel, a respected member of the community, couldn't sway the officer's decision, what hope did anyone else have? He thanked the shopkeeper and stepped back outside, his thoughts swirling. The injustice of it all gnawed at him, refusing to let go. As the day wore on, Marcus found himself replaying the events in his head. He thought about the teenage girl who had filmed the encounter, the courage it must have taken to stand her ground and document the truth. He wondered if she realized the impact her actions might have. Already, people were rallying around the video, organizing protests and demanding accountability. Social media hashtags like Bana Justice for Jamal and Yang Speak Up for Change were trending, drawing attention from far beyond Ridgewood. That evening, after finishing his delivery route, Marcus attended the neighborhood watch meeting he'd promised himself he'd join. The room was packed with residents, many of whom were visibly upset about the day's events. Tensions ran high as people voiced their concerns, some accusing the police of misconduct while others defended them staunchly. Marcus listened quietly, taking it all in. When it was his turn to speak, he hesitated for a moment, unsure whether he should share his thoughts. Finally, he cleared his throat and stood up. "I saw what happened today," he said, his voice steady despite the nerves bubbling inside him. "And I don't think it's right to jump to conclusions without hearing both sides. We need to hold ourselves and our community to a higher standard." His words sparked a mix of reactions. Some nodded in agreement while others shifted uncomfortably in their seats. But Marcus didn't care. For the first time in years, he felt like he was standing up for something important, not just for Jamal, but for everyone who had ever been treated unfairly because of prejudice or misunderstanding. As the meeting drew to a close, Marcus exchanged numbers with a few neighbors who shared his concerns. Together, they planned to attend a peaceful protest scheduled for the following evening. Though he knew it wouldn't solve everything overnight, Marcus felt a flicker of hope. Change might not come easily, but it started with people willing to take a stand. Driving home that night, Marcus reflected on the day's whirlwind of emotions. He thought about Maya, asleep in her bed, and how proud she would be to know her dad was fighting for what was right. And for the first time in hours, he allowed himself to smile. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but he was ready to face it. One step at a time. The next morning, Marcus woke up earlier than usual. The protest was scheduled for later that evening, but the anticipation weighed heavily on him. He couldn't shake the feeling that today would be different, that something meaningful might actually happen. As he prepared breakfast and packed Maya's lunch, his mind kept drifting to the growing movement online. Social media buzzed with updates about justice for Jamal, sharing stories of similar injustices and rallying people across the country to join the cause. Maya noticed her father's distracted demeanor as they sat together at the kitchen table. "Dad, are you okay?" she asked, her big brown eyes filled with concern. "You seem worried." Marcus hesitated, unsure how much to share. How could he explain such a complicated situation to a 9-year-old? But then he remembered the importance of honesty, especially when it came to teaching Maya about fairness and standing up for what was right. "There's something happening in our town," he began gently. "A young man was treated unfairly by the police, and a lot of people are upset about it. Tonight, we're going to a peaceful gathering to show support and ask for justice." Maya tilted her head, thinking carefully before responding. Like when someone gets bullied at school, and everyone tells them it's not fair?" Marcus smiled softly, touched by her insight. "Exactly like that, sweetheart. Sometimes people need help speaking up, and we can use our voices to make things better." Maya nodded solemnly, seemingly satisfied with his explanation. She went back to eating her cereal, though her gaze lingered on her father occasionally, as if trying to understand the weight of what he was carrying. Later that day, after dropping Maya off at school, Marcus met up with a few neighbors who had also committed to attending the protest. They gathered at a local cafe, the same one where Marcus often started his mornings, to discuss logistics and plan their approach. Among them were Sarah, a teacher passionate about social justice; James, a retired firefighter known for his calm demeanor; and Elena, a college student eager to make a difference. Each person brought their own perspective, but they all shared a common goal: to demand accountability and foster change. "We need to stay focused on peace," Sarah emphasized, sipping her coffee. "Protests should send a message without escalating tensions. If we want people to listen, we have to lead by example." Everyone agreed, nodding in unison. Marcus appreciated their determination and unity. For so long he'd felt powerless against the injustices he saw around him. But now, surrounded by others who cared just as deeply, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. Together, they drafted signs with simple yet powerful messages: justice for all, listen to the truth, and fairness matters. As the hours ticked by, excitement and nervous energy built within Marcus. He called Maya's school to let them know she'd be picked up early. They were planning to attend the protest as a family. When he arrived to collect her, Maya bounded out of the building, clutching her backpack tightly. "Are we going now?" she asked, her voice tinged with curiosity. "Not yet," Marcus replied, smiling. "We'll go home first, finish some chores, and then head over. But yes, we're going together." Back at home, Marcus helped Maya create her own sign using markers and poster board. She proudly wrote, "Be kind," in bold letters, adding colorful hearts around the edges. Watching her work reminded Marcus of why this fight mattered, not just for Jamal, but for every child growing up in a world that needed more compassion and understanding. By late afternoon, the group reconvened near the park where the protest was set to begin. Hundreds of people had already gathered, holding signs and chanting slogans in unison. The atmosphere was electric, charged with both anger and hope. Children played nearby under watchful eyes, while volunteers handed out water bottles and instructions for maintaining a peaceful demonstration. As Marcus stood among the crowd holding his sign high, he felt an overwhelming sense of solidarity. Strangers exchanged smiles and nods, united by a shared desire for justice. Maya clung to his hand, her small frame dwarfed by the sea of bodies, but her spirit undeterred. "This is important, isn't it, Dad?" she whispered. "It sure is," Marcus replied, squeezing her hand reassuringly. "And I'm proud of you for being here with me." The protest began with speeches from community leaders, including Mr. Patel, who recounted his version of events from the corner store. His words resonated deeply, drawing murmurs of agreement from the audience. Then came the chants, powerful rhythmic calls for justice that echoed through the streets of Ridgewood. Marcus joined in, his voice rising above the crowd, fueled by a mix of frustration and determination. For the first time in days, Marcus felt a glimmer of optimism. Change wouldn't come overnight, but moments like this, when people stood together, refusing to stay silent, were proof that progress was possible. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm orange glow over the protesters, Marcus allowed himself to believe that maybe, just maybe, tomorrow could be brighter than today. The protest ended as peacefully as it had begun, but its impact rippled far beyond the streets of Ridgewood. As Marcus and Maya walked home that evening, the air felt different, charged with a quiet hope yet tinged with uncertainty. The chants still echoed in Marcus's mind, blending with the sound of their footsteps on the pavement. Maya skipped, beside him clutching her "Be Kind" sign tightly, her energy seemingly boundless despite the long day. When they reached their front door, Marcus paused to take it all in. The neighborhood was unusually quiet, almost as if the entire town was holding its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. Inside, he tucked Maya into bed, reading her favorite bedtime story until her eyelids grew heavy. But even after she fell asleep, Marcus found himself unable to settle. He sat at the kitchen table, scrolling through updates on his phone, watching videos of the protest from different angles, and reading comments from people who had participated or simply observed from afar. Social media buzzed with reactions. Some praised the peaceful nature of the demonstration, calling it a turning point for the community. Others criticized it, accusing the protesters of overreacting or stirring up trouble. Among the noise, one post caught Marcus's attention. A heartfelt message from Jamal's mother, thanking everyone who had shown support. Her words were raw and honest, expressing gratitude for the outpouring of love while acknowledging the pain her family was enduring. Marcus felt his chest tighten as he read her words. It was easy to forget that behind every headline there were real people, families torn apart by fear and anger, struggling to hold on to hope. He closed his eyes for a moment, letting the weight of it sink in. This wasn't just about Jamal anymore. It was about every person who had ever been wrongfully accused, every family that had suffered because of prejudice or misunderstanding. The following morning, Marcus woke up determined to keep the momentum going. He called Sarah, James, and Elena to discuss next steps. They agreed to meet at the cafe again, this time to brainstorm ways to sustain the movement beyond protests. Change required more than rallies. It needed action, education, and accountability. The cafe, the group dove into ideas. Sarah suggested organizing workshops at local schools to teach students about fairness and empathy. James proposed reaching out to city officials to advocate for better training programs for law enforcement officers. Elena, meanwhile, offered to start an online petition demanding an independent investigation into Jamal's arrest. Each idea sparked new conversations, each conversation leading to more possibilities. As they worked, Marcus noticed how seamlessly their strengths complemented one another. Sarah's passion inspired them to dream bigger. James's steady pragmatism kept them grounded, and Elena's tech-savvy approach opened doors to broader audiences. For his part, Marcus brought a sense of purpose, a quiet determination born not only from witnessing injustice, but also from wanting to create a better future for Maya. Later that afternoon, Marcus decided to visit Mr. Patel at the corner store. The shopkeeper greeted him warmly, though his usual cheerfulness was tempered by exhaustion. "It's been non-stop," Mr. Patel admitted, gesturing toward the growing pile of letters and cards left by customers expressing support. "People are rallying around us, which is wonderful, but it's overwhelming too." Marcus nodded sympathetically. "I can imagine. You're doing the right thing by speaking up, though. Your voice matters." Mr. Patel smiled faintly. "So does yours. Marcus, I saw you at the protest last night. You've got courage. The compliment caught Marcus off guard, and he shifted uncomfortably. I'm just trying to do what's right for Maya, for Jamal, for everyone. By the end of the week, the movement had gained significant traction. Local news outlets covered the story extensively, highlighting both the viral video and the community's response. A reporter even reached out to interview Marcus, asking why he chose to get involved. Sitting in front of the camera, surrounded by posters and flyers, Marcus spoke honestly about his experiences and hopes for the future. This isn't about pointing fingers, he said firmly. It's about coming together as a community to say, we deserve better. We deserve fairness. We deserve justice. And we won't stop until we see real change. His words resonated deeply, earning praise from viewers across the country. People began sharing personal stories of similar struggles, creating a tapestry of voices united by shared pain and resilience. Even skeptics started listening, moved by the sincerity and determination of those involved. But amidst the progress, challenges remained. Some residents pushed back against the movement, claiming it was divisive or unnecessary. Tensions occasionally flared during meetings, forcing Marcus and his allies to navigate difficult conversations with patience and grace. Still, they refused to give up. Every setback only strengthened their resolve. One evening, as Marcus tucked Maya into bed, she looked up at him with wide eyes. "Dad, do you think things will get better?" He hesitated, searching for the right answer. Finally, he smiled softly. "I don't know, sweetheart. But I do know that we're doing everything we can to make sure they do. And sometimes that's enough." Maya nodded thoughtfully before closing her eyes. Watching her drift off to sleep, Marcus allowed himself a moment of quiet reflection. The road ahead was uncertain, filled with obstacles and unknowns, but for the first time in a long time, he felt like he was exactly where he was meant to be. Fighting for justice, standing up for what was right, and teaching his daughter the value of kindness and courage. And maybe, just maybe, that was all anyone could ask for. The weeks following the protest brought both progress and resistance, as the movement for justice gained momentum, but also faced pushback from those unwilling to confront uncomfortable truths. Marcus found himself at the center of it all, juggling his responsibilities as a father, delivery driver, and advocate for change. Despite the challenges, he remained steadfast, driven by the belief that even small actions could lead to meaningful outcomes. One morning, while making his usual rounds, Marcus noticed flyers plastered across lampposts and bulletin boards throughout Ridgewood. They advertised an upcoming town hall meeting hosted by city officials who promised to address community concerns about policing and accountability. It was a step in the right direction, or so it seemed. However, skepticism lingered among residents, many of whom doubted whether the meeting would result in tangible change or merely serve as a performative gesture. Marcus decided to attend, bringing Maya along so she could witness firsthand how people work together to create solutions. As they entered the packed auditorium, the air buzzed with anticipation. Rows of chairs were filled with neighbors, activists, and curious onlookers, each carrying their own hopes and fears. At the front of the room, a panel of local leaders sat behind a long table, their expressions ranging from guarded to genuinely engaged. The meeting began with opening remarks from the mayor, who emphasized the importance of unity and dialogue. While his words sounded sincere, they lacked specificity, prompting murmurs of frustration from the audience. When it came time for public comments, hands shot up eagerly, including Marcus's. Standing at the microphone, Marcus took a deep breath before speaking. "My name is Marcus Davis," he said, his voice steady despite the nerves bubbling inside him. "I'm here because I believe our community deserves fairness, not just in words, but in action. What happened to Jamal Carter isn't an isolated incident. It's part of a larger pattern. We need transparency, accountability, and training that prioritizes de-escalation over confrontation." His words resonated deeply, earning applause from the crowd. Others followed suit, sharing personal stories of discrimination and injustice. A young woman recounted being racially profiled at a grocery store, while an elderly man described feeling unsafe during routine traffic stops. Each testimony added weight to the growing call for reform. However, not everyone supported the movement. Some attendees argued that the police were simply doing their jobs and shouldn't be vilified. Tensions flared as opposing views clashed, forcing moderators to step in repeatedly to maintain order. Through it all, Marcus stayed calm, reminding himself that progress often required navigating difficult conversations. By the end of the meeting, city officials announced plans to establish a citizen oversight committee to review police conduct and recommend policy changes. While far from perfect, the decision represented a crucial first step toward accountability. As Marcus left the auditorium, he felt a mix of relief and cautious optimism. Change wouldn't come overnight, but the wheels were finally in motion. Later, that week, Marcus received an unexpected invitation to speak at a regional summit on social justice hosted by a nearby university. Initially hesitant, he accepted after encouragement from Sarah and Elena, who reminded him of the power of storytelling in inspiring others. Preparing for the event proved challenging, as Marcus wrestled with how much to share about his own experiences without overshadowing the broader message. Ultimately, he decided to focus on hope, the kind of hope that came from standing together and refusing to give up. On the day of the summit, Marcus stood nervously on stage, scanning the sea of faces before him. Students, professors, and activists listened intently as he recounted the events leading up to the protest, the challenges faced along the way, and the lessons learned. Change starts with courage, he concluded. Courage to speak up when it's easier to stay silent. Courage to listen when it's easier to judge. And courage to believe that tomorrow can be better than today. His speech earned a standing ovation, leaving Marcus humbled and inspired. Afterwards, several attendees approached him, thanking him for his honesty and determination. One student, a young black man named Elijah, introduced himself shyly. "Your story gives me hope," he admitted. "I want to make a difference too, but I didn't think anyone would listen." Marcus smiled warmly, placing a hand on Elijah's shoulder. "They will if you keep speaking up. Don't ever doubt the power of your voice." As the days passed, Marcus continued balancing his dual roles, as an advocate for justice and a devoted father. Maya, now more aware of the world around her, began asking thoughtful questions about fairness and equality. Together, they explored books and documentaries that highlighted stories of resilience and triumph. Watching her curiosity blossom filled Marcus with pride, reinforcing his commitment to creating a better future for her generation. Despite occasional setbacks, the movement in Ridgewood persisted, fueled by relentless determination and unwavering solidarity. For Marcus, every milestone, no matter how small, was a reminder that progress was possible when people chose to stand together. And though the journey ahead remained uncertain, he held on to one undeniable truth. Hope had the power to light even the darkest paths. With renewed purpose, Marcus prepared for whatever lay ahead, knowing that every step forward brought them closer to the justice they sought. Months had passed since the protest, and Ridgewood was beginning to change, slowly but surely. The Citizen Oversight Committee had been established, and though its work was painstakingly slow, it marked a significant shift in how the community approached accountability. Officers were undergoing new training programs focused on de-escalation and cultural sensitivity, while residents participated in workshops designed to foster understanding between law enforcement and civilians. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress, and for Marcus that was enough. One crisp autumn morning, Marcus stood outside the local courthouse, his heart pounding as he waited for Jamal Carter's case to reach a resolution. After weeks of hearings, evidence reviews and testimonies, the judge was finally set to deliver a verdict. Dozens of supporters gathered nearby, holding signs and banners bearing messages of solidarity. Maya clung to Marcus's hand, her small frame trembling with anticipation. Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere was tense. Jamal sat quietly beside his attorney, his expression unreadable. His mother, Mrs. Carter, dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, clutching her son's hand tightly. Marcus took a seat near the back, feeling both hopeful and anxious. He knew this moment wouldn't erase the pain Jamal and his family had endured, but it could be a step toward healing, a chance to show that truth still mattered. When the judge entered the room, silence fell over the crowd. After a brief pause, she began reading the verdict. After careful consideration of the evidence presented, she said, her voice steady and measured, this court finds no credible basis for the charges against Mr. Jamal Carter. The arrest was unwarranted, and therefore, all charges are hereby dismissed. A collective gasp rippled through the courtroom, followed by murmurs of relief and joy. Jamal let out a shaky breath, tears streaming down his face as he hugged his mother. Supporters erupted into applause, their cheers echoing through the halls. For many, it felt like vindication, not just for Jamal, but for everyone who had fought tirelessly for justice. Outside, the celebration continued. Strangers embraced, sharing hugs and words of encouragement. Jamal addressed the crowd briefly, thanking them for standing by him during one of the darkest periods of his life. I'm not special, he said, his voice breaking slightly. What happened to me happens to so many others, but if we keep coming together like this, maybe things can change. Marcus watched silently, overwhelmed by emotion. He glanced down at Maya, whose wide eyes sparkled with admiration. That's what happens when people care, isn't it, Dad? She asked softly. That's exactly what happens, Marcus replied, pulling her close. When we stand up for each other, anything is possible. In the weeks that followed, the momentum from the case inspired further action. The town launched initiatives aimed at bridging divides, including mentorship programs, connecting youth with community leaders and forums where residents could openly discuss systemic issues. Marcus played an active role, using his growing platform to amplify marginalized voices and encourage dialogue. He often brought Maya along, teaching her the importance of empathy and resilience. Though challenges remained, the sense of unity within Ridgewood was undeniable. Neighbors who once kept to themselves now greeted one another warmly, forming bonds built on shared experiences. Even those who initially resisted the movement began to see the value in listening and learning. 1. Evening, as Marcus tucked Maya into bed, she looked up at him thoughtfully. Do you think everything will stay better now? He hesitated, choosing his words carefully. Better doesn't mean perfect, sweetheart. There will always be more work to do, but I believe we're moving in the right direction. And as long as people keep caring, we'll get there, together. Maya smiled sleepily, snuggling under her blanket. Good night, Dad. I'm proud of you. Good night, Maya, Marcus whispered, kissing her forehead. I'm proud of you too. As he turned off the light and closed her bedroom door, Marcus allowed himself a moment of quiet reflection. The road ahead would undoubtedly have twists and turns, but he no longer faced it alone. He had a daughter who believed in fairness, neighbors who valued kindness, and a community determined to create lasting change. Standing in the hallway, Marcus felt a profound sense of gratitude for the courage to speak up, for the strength to persevere, and for the hope that tomorrow would always bring new opportunities to make the world a little brighter. With a deep breath, he walked downstairs, ready to embrace whatever came next.